Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox 214 on the East Coast and 1114 on the West Coast. Taking a live look over Tel Aviv from one of the many cameras that we do have in the Middle East as we continue to follow everything related to the Israel-Iran conflict. 6 days here that we have heard those sirens blaring over in Israel as folks run for cover and seek shelter. Of course, the back and forth here does continue. I do want to bring in Trey Yinks with Fox News. He is, of course, live as he has been over in Tel Aviv. And Trey, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. What is the situation right there on the ground?
Yeah, Josh, well, 6 days into this conflict, the Iranians are still launching ballistic missiles at this country, and the Israelis are still carrying out a series of airstrikes targeting positions across Iran. There's no sign of this ending anytime soon, and there's a real understanding on the ground that this country has to brace for the possibility that this extends well into next week. But the big question here is whether or not the United States is going to get directly involved. Earlier today, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, spoke about the conflict, and he responded directly to comments from President Trump, saying that the president would like to see this over. He doesn't want to see the Iranians launching missiles toward Israeli cities, but he also doesn't want to see Iran with a nuclear program. Iran's supreme leader said he would not respond to these threats and that the Iranians would not be dissuaded from continuing their campaign against Israel. And so, again, this looks like it's going to continue well into next week. And the entire region is waiting to see what happens next. We do know that Israeli civilians have had some restrictions on them lifted. Businesses here will open tomorrow as scheduled, but they will have to have shelters so that people can respond very quickly to any sort of directions coming from Israel's home front command. Josh?
And Trey, one thing I did want to ask you, because we've talked a lot about Israel and Iran, but what about the situation that is still playing out there in Gaza?
Look, it's a great question, and it's something that we haven't covered as much on air as the focus has been on the war between Israel and Iran. But the conflict between Israel and Hamas continues. There are still 53 hostages being held by Hamas inside Gaza, and each and every day there are dozens of Palestinian civilians that are being killed in Israeli airstrikes inside Gaza, and that's not getting as much attention as the war between Israel and Iran develops. And so you have the situation for Palestinian civilians and Israeli hostages inside Gaza that requires a lot of focus because this is also part of our coverage in the region. Israeli ground operations do continue. At least one Israeli soldier has been killed over the past 24 hours in the southern city of Han Yunis. And there's no end in sight for that conflict either. Negotiating teams are still talking behind the scenes to try to reach some sort of ceasefire agreement that could stop the suffering for Palestinian civilians and bring some of the remaining Israeli hostages home. Israeli officials telling Fox News they believe 20 of them are still alive. And it really paints a picture of what this region is facing, a multi-front conflict that is developing with no clear outcome, no day-after plan for Gaza or for Iran. Josh?
And Trey, my last question here before I let you go, I did want to ask, because these alerts are coming out pretty steadily. We're seeing the alerts from the IDF and Israel in general telling folks to seek shelter. Does it appear that folks there are heeding those warnings, or is it business as usual in some case?
They're certainly heeding the warnings. Earlier today, when we got an incoming alert, we could see along the beach as hundreds of people ran very quickly for shelter, understanding that the alert time is now just down to a matter of minutes before the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles strike this country. Israel has a population of 9 million people. And so there are major population centers, not just here in Tel Aviv, but in the northern city of Haifa and, of course, Jerusalem. In Iran, there are around 90 million people, and we have heard some information from civilians there who have been killed amid the war, from their relatives talking about what this has been like. There's a lot of fear among the civilian population in both Israel and Iran. And as this story develops, we'll try to get more information about the population in Iran, but there is an internet blackout, making it very difficult to gather information there. But from what we can see from our vantage point in Tel Aviv, civilians here are spending most of their evenings in bomb shelters as the Iranians continue their attacks against this city and others. Josh?
All right, Trey Yinks there with Fox News. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and please stay safe out there.
Thank you.
And of course, I do want to take you back out to this live image that we do have over Tel Aviv at this hour. And we also know that President Trump has responded to threats from Iran's supreme leader, saying that, quote, Iran's got a lot of trouble. The commander-in-chief was asked earlier today whether the U.S. would strike Iranian nuclear facilities and told reporters, quote, I may do it, I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do.